Welcome to lesson 2 of this short haunted tree course where we will be sculpting additional detail. And we'll accomplish this with the multi-res modifier. And the main reason to use this instead of dynamic topology is I find it to be a little bit more efficient as far as workflow. And by efficient, I mainly mean speed. So to add this modifier, I'm first going to smooth on my mesh, and then add the modifier itself, and we'll subdivide twice just to get started, and then jump into sculpt mode, where the first thing I want to address is the face here, just to kind of morph it around, make it a little bit more scary, or intimidating rather. So with my grab brush, let's see, I'll pull the mouth down, we smooth it out, and I see that my brushes don't have unified size and strength. So in the options, I'll turn those on. It's just a personal preference. There we go. So now my smooth brush matches my grab. And yeah, so pull the mouth down. Let's give it more of an elongated shape. Let's see, smooth it out. Yeah, that's looking kind of scary, I suppose. Maybe move the whole face down a little bit. I want to make one eye bigger than the other, just to go with some asymmetry. Smoothing those shapes out helps, certainly. Okay, so that's kind of Scream-like. That's not too bad. And when it comes to the knots, the rim of the hole tends to be inflated and puffed out a little bit. So I'm going to add that with my inflate brush, which I activate with the I key. And I think I still have symmetry turned on, which I do. In the X direction, we want to turn that off. And yeah, okay, so that's pretty good for the mouth shape, I think. It's scary enough for my taste. And now I'm ready to step up our resolution of our multi-res modifier. Couple more tweaks real quick. There we go, something like that. And subdivide again to level 3. And let's see if that's high enough resolution, because next I want to start cutting in ridges that run along the length of our trunk and branches that define the flow of our bark. So I'll do that with the crease brush with Shift-C to activate that brush, and then let's see, under the brush drop down at the top in the brush tool panel, the default for this brush is set to subtract, which makes it different from all the other brushes by default. So I'm going to switch that to add so it behaves the same way. And now when I hold Control and make a stroke, the brush is cutting into the mesh and the resolution is not quite high enough. So I'm going to subdivide one more time, which takes our face count up to 1.3 million. And we can see that the viewport starts to slow down a little bit. So this is why I like to use the multi-res modifier in this case, because I can come over here to the tool panel, and under, let's see, under options, I'll turn on threaded sculpt and fast navigate. And fast navigate is great because as I orbit and navigate through the viewport, my mesh automatically subdivides down, which allows for fast navigation. Hence the name. And this really helps to speed up the workflow where dynamic topology does not allow for this feature. Anyway, back to cutting these ridges that define the bark flow. Let's see, we'll cut one down like this. Continue it all the way to the bottom. This is going to be the first pass of ridges that I'll cut. So they'll be pretty large and help define the majority of the flow. And then I'll come back with another layer for additional detail. And this is running a little bit slower with the screen capture software running. So it should be faster when you actually sculpt at this level. But anyway, these ridges are going to follow up into the mouth and help define that shape. About like that. Yeah, that's pretty good. And continue this ridge up around the eye. And here I'm going to emphasize the twisting that I mentioned when I showed you the reference. And I can do this by continuing a ridge up the length of the trunk and then gradually cutting across the mesh. So that will help twist the bark around the tree instead of following it straight up parallel with the trunk. And I'll continue this idea to better emphasize what I'm talking about. And yeah, so that's at least started me in the right direction, and I will continue that with each additional ridge. But instead of just cutting into the tree, I also want to inflate between my cuts. So with the inflate brush, I'll go back and start to puff out segments in between the cuts to give better dimension to our bark flow and general gnarliness of the tree. And follow this into the roots as well. And while I'm thinking about it, let's see, I'm going to grab my inflate brush, make it extremely powerful, and holding control, I'm going to push in to this side here to kind of create a cave of sorts in the base of this tree. And this is a fairly common feature in trees. You should see it in the reference images. In that one specifically that I mentioned, I was interested in the trunk. It has a big one of these. So I'm going to just continue pushing in. And this is merely to add that tree-like feature, which I think is kind of interesting. So I'm going to continue pushing that in all the way down to the ground plane. There we go. And now make it blend with the tree a little bit better. We'll cut in some sharpness. Pinch it up. That's a little too strong. There we go. Kind of like that. And with my crease brush, let's emphasize the walls a little bit better, because the outside around will be bark, but then the inside will be kind of the inside of the tree, which is, you know, splintered wood and whatnot. So we'll emphasize that. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. And continue with our ridge shapes with the crease brush and cutting large lengthwise cuts into the trunk vertically. Just trying to define the flow of the bark. And as we make our way up to the face, I want to be sure to incorporate these eye and mouth tree knots into the flow of the bark as well. That will help sell the idea that this is a tree and I didn't just cut random holes out of it to make it a face. I want it to feel like the way the tree has grown, because it's haunted and it naturally developed this scary face. Okay, so with my inflate brush, I'm now going to inflate towards the top of the tree knots that make the eye to kind of give it like a brow type shape and make it look kind of angry. And the more gnarled that I can make these tree holes that serve as our eyes, the better. And I think the creepier it'll be. So I'm going to try and offset the round nature of the holes, bumps, and ridges to better incorporate it into the tree. And now I can start to incorporate these branches into the flow of the bark by cutting a ridge that curves along the branch and down into the trunk. Yeah, that'll serve to create believable bark. Then go back over it with the inflate brush. There we go, that's starting to come along. Always trying to keep in mind that I want to twist the bark around the tree. Okay, let's see. The more I look at this, the more I think the face in general and the trunk at this point needs to be a little bit thicker because I guess I feel like the tree would not be supported in the facial region. It's just a little too thin. So let's grab and move the trunk to be a little bit thicker. There we go. I think that's a bit better, a little bit more believable. But now I have to work around these ridges. But anyway, I'll come back and polish that stuff later. Right now I want to continue from the trunk into this branch over here on the right side. So back to the crease brush and continue cutting ridges to define bark flow, where we can twist it into the branch. Then with the inflate brush, inflate the ridges in between my cuts that I just made. There we go. And let's see. For the actual branch here, I think it will be cool if I incorporate kind of a bony feel to these branches, almost like bony skeleton fingers. I think that will make it add to the scary nature that I'm going for. I think that will add to the scary feel that I'm going for. But of course, they do still need to look like tree limbs to a degree. So to accomplish this with my inflate brush, in this first segment, I'm going to hold Control to kind of shrink the diameter there. Now go to the next segment and shrink that as well. And the last segment, shrink that also. And what this does is kind of give me a knuckle at each segment break where the segment changes direction. And then I can emphasize this with the inflate brush, push it out a little bit. Also with the crease brush, let's push that out. About like that. There we go. So that starts to look a little bit like a skeleton's finger, but now when I go back and add some bark flow, it'll reincorporate it into the fact that this is a tree. So I'm going to hide my grid floor so that it doesn't hinder me from sculpting from a bottom angle. Let's hide that. Also hide the grid floor. There we go. How about we save real quick? And now that you've seen kind of how I will attack each area of the tree, from the trunk to the face to the limbs and then the minor limbs here, I'm going to continue sculpting, but speed up the process because I'll just be repeating these techniques all the way through the tree.